And thanks for joining us here on PM Express. That conflict in the Middle East between mainly Israel and Iran has set the world alight. The world is really on fire, literally. But there are significant implications for countries like Ghana, but also for Africa that we need to look at, because this affects you, whether you like it or not. And tonight we want to spend some time understanding that. It was just last weekend that our president announced that he has directed our finance and energy ministers to model possible implications of the Israeli-Iran conflict and also suggest mitigation measures. And that really was a cue for us to begin to look at what this means for Ghana, but the wider Africa region. A few things that we can look at, because we know currently fuel is one of the first places to start, because we know how that affects our lives here in Ghana. And let's start there, because the implications are just so wide. But let's start with the question of fuel. We know that Israel has been attacking at least 3 fuel depots, refinery and gas fields have been impacted since this started. And this has implications for the world global supply and energy. We'll look at the implications in terms of how severe they are. One of the first things they've done, we know South Power's gas field has been attacked, right? Part of the world's largest natural gas reserve. It's one of the places that they've attacked, and so you begin to see what impact is, for example, on gas price on the global market is important. One, you look at the Tehran fuel depot, refinery depot, mainly you would say internal, but then the Haifa oil refinery also have been attacked, and Israel is deliberately doing so. Yesterday, we spoke to the Israeli ambassador to Ghana, who explained that this is strategic for them in terms of what their attacks and the places they're deciding to send in missiles to attack. Then you look at the world global oil production of 301.8 million barrels per day. Iran is just around 4% of that. So you say, okay, if that's all Iran produces in terms of the global output, how significant will that be, for example, on global output and prices? We'll talk about the price question pretty shortly, because that is very important. We've seen the impact on price and what the projections are. It stabilized somewhat since the first few hours in the day, after 24 hours after Israel sent in the missiles into Iran. If you look at the global energy focus, oil prices up already, as you see. It's a very important point. It started off around, it was around 60, thereabout in the mid 60s before, and then it's now in the mid upper 70s. We're talking about gas. Gas was there, as you see there, in $3.52 MMBTU. Is climbing quite steadily. Many will say that is fundamentally the reason why this is happening, this very, very sharp jump in the prices. Part of the other reasons why there's a lot of fear is also the Strait of Hormuz, which is a very important channel for the transport of global crude into really the rest of the world. Because if you look at the areas here, Iran is a significant producer, UAE is to Oman, and so there's a lot of focus on what this will mean for that particular strait. So far, it hasn't been that dire, but there is a significant concern. And when the analysts and the finance ministry and energy ministry sit in the room to model the implications, as the president has directed them to do, one of the things they'll look at is what happens to the Ghanaian economy, and particularly to oil prices at a time when we had a similar conflict breaking out between Russia and Ukraine, because it went all the way up there in 2022, and that was very, very significant. If you look at it, almost approaching $120 a barrel at the time in 2022. We're now currently talking about some, just over 70, just in the mid 70s as of today. So we are not there yet. There's quite a fair bit to go. If you believe what Israel is saying, I heard today in international wires the reports from experts that Israel had originally planned for this to last 2 weeks. But as you know, conflicts, once there is first contact, it doesn't necessarily pan out like that. Could this last longer? The longer it lasts and it degenerates into a wider regional conflict. We heard Trump today, for example, suggest that he's talking about now putting the U.S. in the frame of joining Israel in possibly destroying the last remaining enrichment site. When he begins to speak like that, then obviously and the warning has come. If if US joins that fight, it could degenerate into wider regional conflict, and that then obviously could lead to this. So you need to now do projections long term, and that is why we have just the men for this conversation tonight. And I'm looking forward to talking to Dr. Alex Banks, for example, Chatham House. What are their own projections in terms of the long-term impact as far as oil is concerned, but also the geopolitical implications for Ghana and Africa. So stay with us for that. But there's something very interesting playing out in the OPEC countries, right? If you listen to OPEC says, be calm. This is not going to have as much of an impact, and as much of destructive impact to global supplies as people fear. And the Secretary General was the first on Friday when this started to go out on Twitter to say, fundamentally, the market dynamics doesn't warrant unnecessary measures. And then shortly after, we heard from the boss of the IEA, who sounded a slightly concerning tone, even suggesting that the global stockpiles of 1.2 billion barrels could come in play and help stabilize global markets. And that is the global emergency supplies. But OPEC was very quick to condemn that sort of language, to say, that is fear-mongering, and that is what we did in the Ukraine war that led to too early release of global emergency stockpiles. So clearly, if you listen to them and you see what has happened with the price, we are not there yet. It's going up, but it's not terrible yet. And it all will depend on how long this conflict lasts. But also the potential impact on the city's strength against the dollar. As you know, the city has been doing well. Here on the show, we've talked about the city miracle, obviously down to a lot of the deliberate policies that the finance minister and his team have put in place. People call it autonomics, or say Ato is forcing, if you like. And we've seen the impact on the city strength against the dollar. If you look at where we were as at a time that we had a similar conflict with the Russia-Ukraine war, it had a direct impact on the city's strength. It collapsed almost against the US dollar, falling all the way to 14 CD20 pesos at the time. So there's definitely some fear you need to harbor and then begin to plan. And I know the finance minister and the energy minister are already thinking about that very quickly, because if it impacts fuel, it has a direct effect on the cost of living in Ghana. That definitely then affects inflation. And then it has all these implications on the, because we are importing, you're going to be spending quite a bit of money. 400 million a month is estimated that we use to import finished products into the country. If you need that, and that then becomes a significant cost, it puts pressure on the city, definitely, because you're chasing dollars, using the city to chase the dollars, and that puts pressure and leads to that. So that can have significant implications on the strength of the dollar, and that can be devastating if it's not controlled. And I know the finance ministry is working very hard to try to model some solutions. And that's why I have tonight on the show, Dr. Joy Champon joining us to give us a sense of what this will go. Currently, we are at 10:30, which is good because of all the work the current government had done, and so it's good. And this is the figure I was talking about, is what we estimate to import. And so, but the cost of fuel is going to be very key to watch going forward. If you look at our exports currently, as far as the last data is concerned, we are still importing 4.6 billion compared to what we are exporting of 3.9 billion. And so we are still importing quite more. But there is a flip side to this, right? Because we also we are an oil exporting country. And in the budget, we had projected the benchmark crude price at $74.7 a barrel, right? Which is what you see there on your screen, $74.7 a barrel. That's what we use to project. Thanks to the conflict, it's climbed to this particular area that we use for the projection, right? And it could go higher. So when you flip it, we could also make some gains here, right? And some windfall, because it's now around what we were projecting will be the average price for the rest of the year, and that is what we use to project our oil revenues, right? And so again, there's some benefit here, but some may argue sometimes the cost will far outweigh the benefit you're going to get, for example, from the sale of crude because of the high price in the world market. So this is the total economic potential impact on us. Crude oil prices going up, demand for dollars will also escalate. That's a problem. You have the pump prices then going up. That affects transport fares, and then it leads to inflation, energy crisis. So the potentials are quite a lot. But then you have gold Now gold prices are rising again because it's a good store of value. People are panicking a bit because of what is happening and is sending gold prices up. So that, again, is an area that we can make some win for. Very interesting dynamics indeed to watch as far as the implications of this on our pocket is concerned. If you, again, look at the fuel price at the pumps, it has been dropping because strengthening of the dollar, significantly collective utilization. You're looking at the amount. And this, for example, for me is important because we have buffers in place as far as the laws to say planning for a rainy day. And you have the price stabilization levy. There's a lot in there that you can use to stabilize it if indeed it becomes necessary, right? And that is why we decided to look at the question of we've collected 4 billion so far, if you like. We've spent utilized some 2.5 billion. The question of 1.4 billion that it's so this will be accounted for, but that money is supposed to be used to cushion you in case of trouble at this time. And I believe the finance ministry may be considering that and seeing how we can use that for that purpose, right? And then why Ghana is exposed and we lack strategic reserves is a very important point to consider. We lack this. And we'll talk to the chief executive of the oil marketing companies who will tell you that this is a problem that we have. It's one of the fundamental problems that we have. And the recommendations that we've heard other people say, quite a lot that we need to consider to try and fix the problem. My guest will join me, but this is not only economic conversation. It's all about the geopolitics. Beyond the economy, because that for us is key, because that hits your pocket, you feel it directly, but there are geopolitical considerations also here. And my guest will help me unpack this and how African countries and Ghana should be preparing to respond to this particular crisis. As you know, yesterday, there was a vote by the UN nuclear watchdog. We abstained as a country. 10 others did too. Should we have abstained, and what does it mean for us? Stay with us as we unpack all this in my guest in the next hour and a half. And thanks for staying with us here on PM Express. My guest joining me tonight for a conversation is a very good friend of mine. I'm happy that he can join us in the studio. I'll introduce him pretty shortly. But first is Dr. Rivers Odopon. He was here just a couple of weeks ago. He's the CEO of the Chamber of Oil Marketing Companies. And, of course, they are really the point of impact, if you like. And so that's why we have brought him in, just to give us their own forecast because of what is happening in the Middle East. It's strange to think that one missile so far away in the Middle East affects your pocket here, but it affects far more than that. And that is why Dr. Alex Vines is joining us. He's a research director at the Africa program, Chatham House. And this is the second time I'm hosting him on PM Express, and I'm delighted to have him so that we can get his thoughts on their own analysis on this potential impact of what is happening geopolitically on African countries like Ghana and what our response should potentially be. Dr. Theo Champon is an economist, political risk analyst. He's an energy economist as well. And so he really straddles every conversation we're going to have tonight. And so I'm delighted that he can join me. You should read the book that he co-authored on the subject of the upstream oil sector. He will join me pretty shortly. And then I told you about my good friend, it's been a while since I saw him, Emmanuel Bombande. He's a conflict resolution and professional, and joins us in the studio. You know him as a former deputy foreign first minister. I'm grateful that you Mr. Mbane, that you could join me here in the studio. This is a very, as you say, complex subject because it sort of touches almost everything. If you listen to the international experts, it's been quite a while since we last saw this level of conflict between Israel and Iran. And Dr. Alex Vines, I want to start with you at a level. I mean, why should African countries generally in the general continental region, but particularly Ghana, worry or care about what is happening in the Middle East right now?
Well, it impacts supply chains. It impacts the price of oil that you've talked about. It impacts the price of gold. It disrupts travel. So if Ghanaians are going through the Middle East on travel, that will be disrupted too. Places like flights that go near Iran at the moment or near Israel are being disrupted. So Ghana, stroke the African continent, is not immune by any means to what's going on in the Middle East. And this it overlaps with all the conflicts that we've also seen elsewhere. The Ukraine, Russia one is also one that has inflated the price of commodities and has also impacted the price of fuel, which you mentioned. So we are interconnected, and so Ghana can't ignore this, as I can't in my own country here in the UK.
That's a very important point. But Mr. Momande, there's also the question about geopolitics of this, right? And I want to go to the implications of where we are pitching our tent. Yesterday, in the same chair you seated currently, was the Israeli ambassador who was here to grant an interview on the subject. And they were disappointed that when it came to voting to call out Iran, just, I believe, on Thursday before the first missiles went into Iran, to indeed adopt the resolution that said Iran had violated its obligations under the disarmament, that we chose to abstain, right? And many African countries abstained too. Burkina Faso voted with Russia and China on that question. In fact, the ambassador actually was so bold to assert that Ghana should reconsider non-aligned position on this matter going forward, because we know, but before this war ends, we'll be called again to sort of take a position. And we coincidentally chair the IAEA, the UN, nuclear watchdog, currently Ghana. What's your own assessment of the implications of that? We'll come to the economy pretty shortly, but that is an important point too that we need to consider as a country, but also as a continent.
No, thank you so much. Well, first of all, without detailed comments on the ambassador's observations, we cannot run away from the fact that it underscores their sense of entitlement to the extent that they have become very sophisticated in orchestrating how, as an aggressor, they are always the victim. And everybody must see it the way they see it, but they are not prepared to see it the other way around. But without going into those in detail, our abstention, I will relate to our historical antecedents of positive neutrality. And we talk about that without expatiating. Basically, the antecedents of our foreign policy is that when there is a global crisis such as the one we have, Ghana wants to mediate and be an intermediary, because we understood right at our independence that when there is instability globally, it directly impacts on our capacity to attain our vision of economic development. We are a developing country, and so too much of Africa. And so you do not want the destabilization of various aspects of our global landscape that now puts the type of pressure and weight on our capacity to pursue our vision. You were making those observations with my good brother here before we started the program, that we are coming out of a situation in which the economists will tell you we are beginning to look on the brighter side of our economy coming back. The downgrading of some of our indicators are being upgraded. The last thing we need is the type of instability that now draws us back to where we came from, that we do not want to be.
And the last time this happened was Russia-Ukraine, same conflict, war.
Yeah.
And it drew us back quite significantly at the time.
That is it. And let me then add that whilst you look at the immediate economic impact, as the experts here will talk about it, if you look at it and consider it from the global landscape, the potential of what we are seeing now just being like a Sunday school play is really high, because let us hope that nobody is going to join the current level of escalation. If what we are hearing is true and some countries begin to join, it could metastasize.
And you make a very important point, because Dr. Vines, today I think you must be referring to Trump.
Yes.
And his comments.
Yes.
I mean, and Dr. Vines, Trump's comment and the fear for Ghana and a lot of African countries, and our president had already said, finance minister, energy minister, start modeling. You want this to end as quickly as possible so we can come back to normalcy and continue with our planning, right? But when you begin to read Trump's message, I think it's what Bomande is talking about here, how should African presidents, currently thinking about what reaction, what should they be reading into the Trump comments today? That it almost seems to suggest that they're about to join.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's very difficult to predict what Trump is really saying. He can be very ambiguous. You know, at one moment he says, you know, we want all-out surrender, which is in one of the comments that he made in X, and he's suggesting that they know where the supreme leader is and that they don't want to kill him for now, but they might in the future if he doesn't reach an agreement. So I don't know if this is the art of the deal of Mr. Trump or not. On how Ghana handles this, I do think that the Ghanaian position of being non-aligned is the correct one. This is not something that Ghana wants to get involved in on one particular side. Not surprised at all. I would have predicted Burkina Faso with the junta there siding with the Russian Federation, Iran, and on this occasion China, although China often abstains too. We are in a dangerous situation, and I am worried that there is a tug of war going on in the United States in the Make America Great Again caucus, with some that are arguing for regime change in Tehran and some saying, no, the MAGA priority is to make America great again, and America first means not getting involved in other people's conflicts. If we look at history, American involvement in a regime change in the Middle East has not worked well for them. Look at what happened in Iraq. Look at what happened in Libya, although the Europeans took the lead on removing Mr. Gaddafi. So this type of politics carries enormous dangers, and I hope that the learning of history is actually one that policymakers in Washington also consider. We'll see where this goes. It's no doubt that the Israeli administration, Netanyahu, would like regime change in Iran. And if you look back at history, he was arguing for the removal of Saddam Hussein, and look at what situation that resulted in.
I mean, Dr. Riversing, on that point, and Bomani raised it, Vines is talking about it, the potential for this to drag. The first impact will be you feel it first because you are interfacing before we buy the fuel. You must, at your level, at the OMC level, start thinking hard about what's happening and what your potential response could be, right?
Yeah, you're right. That's the same reason why exactly a week ago, when we were asked to predict the outlook for this window, we were very skeptical. It was as though we knew something of this sort was going to happen. We gave ourselves till Friday when this incident happened, actually. And all of a sudden, as already alluded by the expert of conflicts and all that, we see hike in crude oil prices. As it stands today, Platts has escalated by 13% within 5 days, doing around $723 per MT. Which was around 650 that we saw. So obviously, we know that things will not be the same even within this same window that we are now. Even though we should have, as an industry, enjoy the full 2 weeks window. But we have the insight that probably next week things might change. And that's why we are starting our dialogue with the likes of CBO, the government, from tomorrow. What might happen is that some BDCs or OMCs will start holding product to wait for the next window when prices will surely go up, looking at what is happening in the market now, and also to be able to make more profit. And that's why I normally educate people that we have a price hike today in the market, but fuel price went down 2% in the pump price. So someone asked, how is that possible? And it's the same way when fuel price, are going down, and we ask you to give us just a little bit a couple of days to readjust our system, because we are working within windows that we have full control over in a forecasting. We have product that we've bought in the past that we need to sell into the market. So we don't really jump onto selling food at a high prices or selling at a low price when the price dynamics change. Because we are totally right to sell for a price today at $15, 15 cedis per liter, because we already know what is happening in the world. But today, some have been selling at 10.5. So when it comes to what is ahead of us,
you said your projection is that it's going to go up at the pumps in your next pricing window.
Yeah, for sure.
But what will account for that? Is it just the international crude prices going up?
For now, yes.
Because domestically, nothing has changed. The CD is still very strong.
Yeah, it is. So, like I always say, that there are two levers that round the show, and is the forex, and also the international benefit.
So the only factor that will account for the setting rise in the next window will be the $75 barrel that we now see, because it jumped from around 60.
Yeah, so we're going to look at the plat actually. So the plat today, that's increased by 13% in 5 days. What we're going to look at, and that will be probably going to the next week. That will be able to do that.
Mr. Bomani, I think that's a point you're touching on, and that really will depend on how long this conflict.
Exactly.
That will depend on how long. But let me build on what Alex said,
yeah,
and go back into a bit of history.
Yeah.
The current Prime Minister of Israel was vociferous in influencing the invasion of Iraq, 2003. We know Netanyahu. We know that at the end of it, more than 1 million people were killed. But more than that, it radicalized some elements who then exploited religion because they saw it as an attack on their faith. That gave birth to ISIS. Why am I bringing this into the conversation? There were terrorist attacks around the world, and we were still in West Africa trying to understand exactly where this was going. The point and the short story of it is the ISIS then gave birth to the affiliations of Jenin, the Greater Islamic State of the Sahara, and all the terrorist groups that are now active, to the extent that our region, particularly the Sahel, is the global epicenter of terrorism.
And you trace it all the way back
completely
to that single action that Netanyahu was involved in.
Exactly. That built on to the point in which, though ISIS was curtailed, it had unleashed its venom and potential, and we are still having the effects in West Africa. Our democratic project of regional integration, the economists will talk about 350 million West Africa's trading and etc., has been halted. 3 of our key member states have left. And for us in Ghana...
Fundamentally because of insecurity.
Insecurity.
That really fueled the rise of these military leaders who came promising that they can deal with the insecurity.
Exactly. The first argument of the military leaders was that the civilians were not taking the fight to the terrorists. So they overthrew the civilian leaders to have a revolutionary transition to fight head on. And in our case, were it not for Captain Ibrahim Traore leading the effort in Burkina Faso, we could have had incursions already. But even without Ghana having those incursions, my home region, the Upper East, Boku, it's knocking every day. And so you trace it back to the consequence of how conflict, when prolonged, it does not just have the economic impact, it halts so many development projects, including constitutional rule, democracy, development, and we're still struggling with that. And that is why, if we have this second wave going to prolong itself because others then get involved, then only God knows where the trajectory is. Because what we have experienced could be nothing compared with what is happening.
And you're right, because often Africa then becomes the stage for nurturing all these groups that, obviously because of their hatred for Israel and the West, we sort of get in the middle, which is what you talked about, the Sahelian groups that were all inspired by.
Yes, and Alex threw in the Libyan factor, which I do not build on. But the point is, you can see a corresponding relationship. And why does this become important? If I had another 30 seconds, it's just simply to see. It doesn't matter how protracted and complex a conflict is. we are looking at the capacity to respond to it. Now, the reason I'm making my argument the way I'm doing it is because if you even compare us today to 2003, our capacity to respond has deteriorated. And that's why
How so?
So I carried my personal copy of the Charter of the United Nations. This is no longer of value because all the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, who were the leaders of the 26 allied countries who worked hard for the foundation of the UN, but building on this charter to say that global cooperation is so important to prevent conflicts so that we do not have another world war as we had in the Second World War, are in themselves now incapable of respecting the tenets of the charter because their personal interests, the egos of some leaders has overridden the values and the principles of the charter. And that's why, as Alex made the reference, it is unprecedented for a sitting head of state of another country to talk so casually about, we know where this leader is hiding and we can kill you, but we'll not kill you now. It is, you don't talk like that in the international space, but we've come to accept it as normal. And when we hear those things, it no longer shocks us, but it is shocking. And that's what I'm saying, because our capacity to respond to such global crises has deteriorated, there's no international cooperation. Even when of the 15 members of the Security Council, the 10 non-permanencies do anything they want to do, just one of them, like last week, the United States vetoed a permanent ceasefire on Gaza. And because of the recurrence of these vetoes, now that was the 5th or the 6th, it becomes paralyzing to even talk about global cooperation, to talk about global efforts. And look at what happened, is it today, coming out of the G7 summit?
Left early.
Some of the conclusions were Israel has a right to defend itself. Who does not have a right to defend itself? And so the aggressor is the one who is protected by the permanent members of the P5, who are also in the G7, who basically have signed, they've signed a check without addressing the holder. You can do whatever you want in this world. You have a right to defend yourself. And if anybody stands in your way, that person is the source of global instability. And in this case, Iran is defined as the source of global instability. And the one who attacked with the first wave of bombardments, they have a right to defend themselves. That is the weird perception and logic that we have developed that now makes us paralyzed in responding to such crises that then leads to the analysis that he's making in terms of his forecast.
I mean, Dr. Alex Vines, it appears to me from Mr. Bombande's analysis that Africa stands to lose the most if this drags even what is happening currently. Shouldn't we then see a more assertive posture from our leaders on the continent on this subject, seeing that the West, a lot of the permanent members of the UNESCO, already have taken a position on one side, at least that appears so? Should we be more assertive, not just Ghana, but as a continent on this particular subject?
Movements, even in the UN Security Council, when the Africa Three come together and find a common position. And, Ghana had that experience where it was on the council a couple of years ago. Currently, it's Somalia, it's Sierra Leone, it's Algeria, and then Guyana in the Caribbean aligns with it. And so, but of course, what you've just heard, the problem is that the United States or maybe China or Russia, a P5 country will often veto something that they don't like. And we had that veto just recently by the United States that we heard related to Gaza. So I would completely agree that the global governance structures that we have at the moment are not functioning, and the UN in particular is divided and particularly dysfunctional. Hence, different efforts need to take place to find mediation. I would actually argue that I don't think that all the G7 are aligned with Mr. Trump by any means. I think Mr. Macron, the British Prime Minister, the Italian Prime Minister are all looking to find some softer landing mediation effort. My own analysis of British politics is that having been very pro-Israel, partly because the Labour Party, the party of government here, had an anti-Semitic problem. That's changing now because of the realities of what have been being observed in Gaza and the behavior of Netanyahu. So it's a complicated canvas that we're talking about. And Africa does have, I think, in global debates, a strong position potentially if it can be collective because of the numbers. I mean, 54 or 55 countries, depending how you want to, whether you're Moroccan or not, I guess, and some other countries, are a very large group of the international system. And I think a strong collective position could force particular results in forum. Unfortunately, Africa is pretty divided, although the majority position on this new crisis is one of abstention, which I think is the right position for Ghana. And I think this is the way forward to abstain in this and not get involved in a particular position. Having said that, on a humanitarian issue, I think then collective condemning this, in the end, this is a conflict that needs to stop, would be really important. But the world is getting more complicated. There's multipolarity now. There are more and more states can assert in the international system. And I think there is an opportunity for African countries in this regard. My final point is that it's a shame that the continental body is very weak, the African Union, and finds it very difficult to voice a collective position on something like this. The former foreign minister talked about the fragmentation of ECOWAS, which is a tragedy on its 50th anniversary that 3 West African states have fragmented. But the Pan-African vision that was born out of Ghana, Gold Coast, is also very much challenged just at the moment, unfortunately, from what I can see.
I mean, Dr. Rivers, I saw you nodding to the point about the disunity and how we don't have a collective voice, which we should. That has, it's fascinating, right, to hear both Emmanuel and Dr. Vines. Don't we appreciate that we stand to lose the most? Why we need to come together to do something about this? It's sort of the world, the game is being played around us. And then we then host a problem. It's sort of shipped to us. When the fuel prices go up, because we are poor, we feel it the most.
Yeah, exactly.
We have no strategic reserves. In fact, the whole of Israel have more strategic reserve in fuel than possibly the entire continent. The analysis show that.
Yeah.
And yet we are not showing any urgency to sort of take this matter on as a collective because our people will suffer the most. That must drive you nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it does. And I'm somebody who have always criticized AFTA and the AU, in mostly many African events. We've become a talk show as a continent. We have all the great policies. We have the great brains, like Honorable here. If you look at the AFTA mission and vision, it's so not different from what AU was created for. Intercontinental trading, movement, free movement, and all that. I was so devastated when I had to pay $250 for visa in Gabon as an African.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. You know, you pay $150 for visa in Congo. I mean, how much did you pay to go to Europe? So I think the Africa unity is at a limbo at this moment. And this is the right time that AU should have called for an emergency meeting. Yeah. G7 is talking. Yeah. What's AU doing? Yeah. They're sleeping. Yeah. You know, and when look at...
You're absolutely right. We haven't even said AU emergency.
Yeah. It should.
So that we can take a collective position and issue statement.
And absolutely, when you look at the continent, we are actually the richest continent in the world. Yeah. Yeah. And today, 85 to 90% of our resources are exported in their raw state. And we import everything back. Yeah. And don't we have demand for it? You know how much of our crude oil today is even refined here. If we had our own crude oil refining in this country, we wouldn't be crying this cry today. No. We wouldn't be worried about anybody's country's impact. We have Tamale refinery working, now they send to the other platinum or whatever refineries they have. No. We import no less than 6 billion liters of crude oil product every year. You know, so where did we go wrong?
But Dr. Rivers saying, let's switch the argument. Isn't there an economic benefit in what is happening? Because we are an oil exporting country. It was just around $65 a barrel. Yeah. And when the first missile hit, by close of days, gone 70, 75 thereabout. We, as I said at the beginning of my show, we had done a projection, the budget, that the benchmark global crude price that we used to calculate our revenue this year was $74.7 a barrel. Yeah. Thanks to this conflict,
we're going to achieve it.
We're exactly there now. We're exactly there now. Yeah. We're actually way below that now. And that's one. The secondly is gold. Today, if you watch the global price, gold prices are going up again because people are now, investors are moving again to, again, we are rich in gold. There's definitely some benefits there.
Yeah, I mean, if you do compare, and that's why I wish my brother to jump on us for this.
Yeah, he's actually joining us.
Okay, so fantastic. So if you look at the net position of selling raw crude oil and importing the product, you lose so much. After all, how much crude oil do you have? You understand? So if you're selling a barrel at 75, and today you're going to buy the product back at $800, which is the projection for next week. $800. I mean, do the comparison. India produces nothing, but India is an oil-rich country because of the refinery. They buy crude oil from everywhere in the world. Then there's something called the economic petroleum multiplicator, which is 8. So it's a rule of thumb that assumes that if you refine any crude oil at whatever price, you get 8 times revenue from what you get. You understand? So basically, we are running at a loss in terms of how much gain you get selling and buying the product. So
the net effect is negative.
It's negative for sure.
Let me put that to Dr. Tue Champong, who is now joining us, economist, political risk analyst. He really cut his teeth in oil and gas, so he understands this better than I do. Dr. Tue Champong, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Great. Apologies, I'm not on video. Just landed from the flight.
No problem at all. If I put it to you that the fears that this will throw our economy, out of kilter and cripple us because the world crude price will go up to the levels we saw with the Ukraine-Russia war is grossly exaggerated, and that it won't happen, and that we'll possibly be benefiting more than we will lose. What will be your reaction to that?
I don't necessarily think that that's the case. So for sure there are concerns, and I do share those concerns around the potential impact, especially on the fuel front, and then the cascading impact of that on inflation. So if you recall, during Russia-Ukraine, when similar incidents did happen on the oil price in the early days, it went all the way up to about $140-something a barrel. And then eventually it did, calm down. And we did see some of that pass through into what some would call imported inflation through the fuel price, and then ultimately through things like food, transport, and whatnot. But on the other side, like Riverson was saying, of course, we also produce some oil in Ghana, and we do export, that oil. However, if you actually look at the revenues that come into us as a country, is actually far smaller than what we spend importing petroleum products into the country. So the net on that side is actually negative, right, for us. When you look at it from a much bigger level in terms of the trade balance of the country, when you do the export and you're counting the numbers on the central, bank side, yes, you see a bit of an uptick on the trade balance, but realistically, what comes to us as a people from the oil exports, vis-a-vis what we spend on importing petroleum products into the country, we actually spend more on the imports than we do get from our own export of oil. So you can and would have some impact there. But I think the most important thing is how long do we expect this crisis to actually last? The longer that persists and the longer the uncertainty is factored in by global commodity markets, then the likelihood that you're seeing higher prices and then the government would have to make some adjustment to its numbers. So I think importantly for me, one of the key indicators that we've got to look out for would be during next month's mid-year budget review, to what extent, if any, the government has adjusted its fiscal projections to accommodate for any of the downside risks that could affect us as a result of this conflict. And like Alex and Dr. Bombande have also said, the other point is that we live in a world where there is more geopolitical uncertainty. In fact, a lot of these external shocks, whereas you used to see them every decade or so, my own look at some of the numbers indicates that, every 2 to 3 years, we should be prepared for some major external event that is going to have a huge impact on economies or small open economies such as Ghana. So the point then becomes, what should we do as a people, given that you're going to have more of these shocks, more of these instabilities, both on the security front, but importantly also the human impact of that in terms of food, fuel, and whatnot.
Go on.
Go on. Please,
No, because I'll just come into that because I was coming to the point that the president made. The president's direction was model and tell me how we mitigate. And I think it's the same question you were asking. What are the possibilities? If the finance minister and the energy minister are to comply with the president's directive, what can they possibly put before the president that would put you to rest in the evening and know waking up in the morning you don't have to worry that we've got it? What could that be?
Well, I think the first early signs that they've done with the temporary halting of the 1 CD extra levy on the petroleum prices, it was meant to have started, I think, today, and that has been temporarily halted. I think that is a good show of faith in terms of trying to carry the people along and trying to be proactive or responsive to the needs of the people. That's number one. Number two comes from what we have in terms of our reserves and the ability to actually, one, safeguard the city and the appreciation that we've had in the last couple of weeks. And then more medium to long term, what do we do to fundamentally turn around this economy? We've been on various platforms, some with you, some with others, and we've been talking about, diversification since, the 1960s, and not really much, has happened. But not until we actually get to the nitty-gritty of the issues of building a much more robust, diversified economy that is adding at least some value within some of the areas that you have some relative comparative advantage, then unfortunately, you're still going to be heavily exposed, to these shocks that I've mentioned every 2 or so years you're going to have. So I think for now, as a country, we do have some moderate reserves. We do have some, buffers to be able to withstand these shocks. But nobody really can tell where and how long this conflict is going to last. Some of the things that I was reading prior to joining the show from the FT and Reuters and some of the other platforms indicate that, like for example, the oil price, it looks like it's already been baked in, and that this conflict, perhaps there might be some solution in the coming weeks. That would be good for us. But of course, we cannot live as a people, just relying on the wherewithal of what happens on the external front. Fundamentally, what COVID has taught us, what Russia-Ukraine has taught us, and now what this new front with the Israel-Iran war is teaching us is that as Africans, we need to take a bold step of our own destiny, whether it is asserting ourselves on the international front or building much more diversified, robust economic systems that delivers for our people. Other than that, you just become, pawns in the global game.
And pawns in the global game, but really, what can we do? Mr. Bobman, let me come to you on that question. Yes, we are pawns in the global game, but when a country like South Africa dared to drag Israel to the ICC, we saw what happened. In fact, many say Trump's fight with South Africa and this allegation that whites were being deprived was also a rogue to punish them for. In fact, he froze a lot of aid to South Africa. And we saw that Ramaphosa had to get on a flight and get to Washington, D.C. and was literally humiliated on national television. You watched it. So this is an African country that dared stand up to say what Israel was doing was wrong and got results for it. So a tiny country like Ghana and our president sees that. Do you really think an African country president will dare attempt to be assertive on this particular matter when they see that happen to South Africa, the big boys on the continent?
So first of all, Dr. Riverson and Dr. Tio, thank you for your brilliant exposés, because you lead me to appreciate in responding to you that our strength is in our collective and not our single individual countries, as you have mentioned. Now, do you realize that when President Ramaphosa was being given or was giving all these, if you call it, wrong videos, some of them never on South African soil, one was from DRC, the entire continent, except our president, who wrote an op-ed in solidarity with President Ramaphosa, nobody on the continent showed any sign that we are together in this. And basically, President Mahama was saying, this humiliation is not only to President Ramaphosa, it is the whole of the continent, which leads me to say that what Dr. Revison was saying is, we should have by now been convening an emergency meeting in our collective to even understand and appreciate with our experts, what are we going to do? Now, the technocrats in Addis Ababa, they should be urging the political leadership, our chair of the African Union, the president of Angola, to pursue this. But diplomacy is an art that is 24 hours a day. And you must be very good at responding as issues come and evolve. We are not good at that. And so one might want to suggest that, and I thought somebody in Ghana already suggested that that should be the role that President Mahama could consider. How do they galvanize the African leadership so that they can begin to see the collective? And this is us. I remember once in the Club de Madrid, I was interacting, and our former president, John Kufuor, made a statement that I never forget. He said, Ghana might be small, but we punch above our weight. Meaning, let us not always sit and see ourselves as a small dot in the global landscape. Because Ghana has the moral voice. We have the moral authority. And that's why I want to conclude this point by saying, let us never deviate on the principle and on the values. Mediation today has become largely transactional, a quid pro quo. So what would you give me and what would I give you? And principles don't matter. When you do that, then as a continent of Africa, we are going to always be at the losing end because we will never have enough. And that's why Ramaphosa made that joke. I wish I had a plane and I would have given you.
Yes.
Basically saying, we don't have that wealth to use to get what we want. But there is something we have. The moral voice, the moral authority. And when Ghana was on the Security Council, when Kenya was on the Security Council, Russia, Ukraine, Gaza, we spoke to the principle. We spoke to the UN Charter. We insisted on international law. We insisted on international humanitarian law. So very quickly, we must continue to advocate for a reform of the UN system so that Africans too can have permanent seats on the Security Council to raise that voice. We internally must work together. We must do that 24 hours a day. I mean, look at the fact that we don't need to sometimes physically meet now. We can do those meetings online.
Yeah.
The last bureau meeting chaired by Angola was online. It was not physical. So these are the type of things that we must do. But we are sitting down and behaving as if everything is normal. The world has changed. The dynamics have brought us to a new stage. And we must correspondingly be so active, be so agile, and have the capacity on a daily basis to respond to issues that is of the African interest.
I mean, you listen to PM Express, and fascinating conversation. We have a few more minutes on this because it's a special conversation, and we must have it to understand how this affects all of us. My guest, Dr. Alex Vines, Research Director, Africa Program, Chatham House. Imam Bandy, who you just listened to, is a dialogue and mediation practitioner, former Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration. Dr. Rivers Ndopon, you hear him here in the studio, the CEO of the Chamber of Oil Marketing Companies. Dr. Tue Champon, the economics and political risk analyst. I'm going to take a break. When I return, I'll bring in Dr. Vines on the question of, there's a lot of optimism, and so we should do something as an African continent on this. The suggestion is that we should come and be collective. So what really, when I say collective, is this simply issuing a statement? What really can we realistically do to move the needle on this particular subject and others? I'll ask his thoughts on this when we return. But also the question that the president has tasked our finance minister and the energy minister to do. I'll ask Dr. Riverson's opinion on that. What should the model be? What should the response to the president be from the two ministers? I know today they met to try and begin the modeling. What should the mitigation measures be? So that's for Ghana. But for the continent, what should it be? Because when the rest of the continent struggles, it tends to have a ripple effect on all of us. I'll pick the thoughts on these when we return here on PMX. So stay with me. We're still live here on PM Express, a really important conversation, weighing up everything in terms of the continent and what our response should be to the global conflict. Because each time there's a global conflict, we are on the receiving end of the worst part of its impact. And yet we do absolutely nothing about it. The missiles are flying again, and each missile, when it lands, we begin to fill in our pockets already. And we've heard Dr. Riverson tell us that the next window, expect fuel prices to inch up, primarily because of the conflict that just started between Israel and Iran. Also because, he says, as you analyze, currently we're doing well. So the city is strong. So that if we were holding that constant, you shouldn't see any jump at all. But because of this other one that is happening in Israel and Iran, expect an inching up. And so the question then becomes, we have a stake in what is happening as a country, but as a continent. But the consensus around the table is, yes, first of all, do we even appreciate we have a stake? And if we do, what can we do? And that's the question I want to bring my guests in to now deal with. Dr. Rivers Ndopon, CEO and Industry Coordinator, Chamber of Oil Marketing Companies. Also with us, with me tonight is Dr. Alex Vines. And I'm delighted that he could join us, make time to join us here on the program. He is the Research Director, Africa Program at the Chatham House. Thank you for staying with us, Dr. Alex Vines. Also with me is the Dr. Tue Champon. And Dr. Tue Champon is a political risk analyst. He is an economist also, and he's also joined us. And Emmanuel Bombande, dialogue and mediation practitioner, a former Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration. Dr. Vines, I want to circle back to the question about Africa's united response. What should it be if, let's say, the AU boss was listening to you tonight and decided to take your advice, and African presidents too? What can it be for it to be effective? What should it be? What should the Africa response be?
Well, the African Peace and Security Council should meet in Addis. They should issue reach a consensus on a declaration and define what it is that they would wish to see out of this confrontation between Iran and Israel. So obviously, emphasize the values that we've been debating in terms of international humanitarian law, human rights, the rules of law, of war and engagement, these type of things that are completely lacking at the moment in international discussion. You can't even get them through in the UN Security Council. So the collectivism, I think, is very important in terms of the African Union, and the chair of the commission, as well as the chair of the African Union, Joao Lorenzo Bangola, I think could play a role there. And then, of course, at the UN Security Council, although it is fragmented, to have the Africa Fleet 3+1, so Sierra Leone, Somalia, and Algeria and Guyana, also come up with a common statement with other members of the UN Security Council, okay, and a draft resolution. I mean, imagine if it led as a draft resolution, for example, by the Africa Free, and the United States vetoes it. That's fine. It's still a statement of intent, which could be draw out of the deliberations at a continental level that have been made at the African Union. Beyond that, it's more then about preparing for further crisis in the future. And I mean, Dr. Teo talks about the importance of diversification of economies and making the most which of the strengths within the African continent. So that's value addition of commodities. My own view is that Ghana has a real opportunity with very heightened gold prices to benefit from that with reforms, including on how to work more effectively with small producers. I mean, the projections are that gold will probably peak this year and then go down. So there are other areas of the Ghana economy, I think, are very important. I mean, cocoa and coffee production, so the agricultural base is another one. It's interesting if you look at the projection of Ghana in the spring meetings in Washington for its economy. There was a downgrading of Ghana, partly predicated on the idea that oil prices were going to decline, and that would affect on the projections of the budget for Ghana.
Yeah.
But of course, that's now not happening, and so that although obviously Ghana will find more expense in importing fuel, that the oil price is more aligned to the budget projection, probably will be good news for Ghana. Certainly in other oil producing countries, it will be something that's important. Angola, for example, has been crisis managing, modeling how what cuts it would need to do if the oil price went down to $55. That was only 2 weeks ago. Now they're reimagining this at the moment. So things are moving around at the moment in terms of the short-term response to the commodity price fluctuation of oil.
But there's a point there, though, as I hear you push for the Africa response. The geopolitical context now is pretty much very visceral and unforgiving. And we have a leader of the free world who has made it his policy to punish countries that do not toe his line. Considering how poor and fragile most African countries are, and the countries that you mentioned, for example, who can sponsor a resolution, knowing the current geopolitical situation, the stakes, that they know that if they take that stance, they could actually be struck with a hammer through some threat of sanction, withdrawal of aid. Isn't that why most African countries possibly now are hesitating in taking a step on the subject because of the world order imposed by Trump?
So the reality is the Trump administration is deprioritizing the African continent. I mean, sub-Saharan Africa in particular. If you look at the appointments of where Trump has appointed ambassadors, it's North Africa and South Africa. That's it. Otherwise, it's chargé d'affaires. And there's no intention of fast streaming appointments of ambassadors to diplomatic missions. The USAID cuts are serious, and they have impacted a number of countries very significantly. The Democratic Republic of Congo in West Africa, the most impacted is Liberia. And then the Trump administration is very much focused on where it sees strategic and critical minerals. That's a priority for it. Hence, they're discussing about a peace deal with Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo because of the importance of rare earths and certain minerals in the Congo, for example. So my own sense is that a collective position from the African Union won't be the Trump administration won't respond in the vicious way that we, for example, saw the response to South Africa because of the kind of the indifference almost to the African continent, if I put it that way, from the Trump administration. The South African experience, I think you already mentioned. I mean, I think it was the South Africans pursuing Israel in the International Court of Justice, which was the primary driver for the South Africa for the Trump administration's focus on South Africa so early on. And then there was a secondary factor, which I think is around Elon Musk and wanting to soften up the South Africans for contracts, including for his Starlink satellite network. But even there, I mean, the South Africans are offering a kind of minerals and gas deal to the United States in the hope that Mr. Trump might soften his position in the run-up to the G20 summit, which South Africa is hosting towards the end of this year. South Africa needs to import a great deal of gas, and they said that they'd do that from the United States. So let's see where that goes. Mr. Trump is, in the end, very transactional rather than ideological, in my opinion.
Do you agree with that point, to that question about the potential for sanctions, recriminations, and for a lot of the economies? They fear that they could actually be at the receiving end of a Trump penalty, if you like.
Yes, in some way, but Dr. Alex, I appreciate one important point that you made. Regardless, let us collectively demonstrate we have one voice on principle.
Somebody must start it. Somebody must initiate. You suggested our president should do it, but...
Well, our president is not the chair of the African Union. You see, again, because of the credibility that we have, I don't want to praise ourselves too much, but because our credibility is in our democratic credential, our leader would always be mentioned. Because if you don't have, you see, the convener must have the credential that has a moral authority in it, that has some credibility in it. So what he can do is continue talking and engaging. But what does it tell you, Evans? Without being told, shouldn't we now be our own masters in resolving the conflicts that continue to divide us? Rwanda, DRC.
We haven't fixed our own problems. I mean,
and so how then do we have that collective voice? So those are some of the challenges. But it doesn't matter whether what we have decided to do collectively has a far-reaching effect or not. Let's do it. If it's a travel ban and we all come together and we have one stand, do you know the amount of money that America will lose?
Trump doesn't care, does he?
Well,
that's the 6 most countries coming up, and Ghana.
But his own country, corporate America, will begin to fight him. United Airlines, Delta in Ghana, they have daily flights, and multiply that to all the African countries, they fly daily. And when they begin to realize they are losing money, it is not for us to go to the United States and fight Trump. They will say this is wrong. And here I'm talking about his own preferential area, which is trade, which is making money, which is making deals. Let's not worry about the diplomatic side, which is more political. But where he likes most, which is making more money, corporate America will begin to fight him. And if we do that and we do it efficiently, solidarity in the BRICS. Is it not interesting that today is the Central Asian countries with the president of China are signing treaties about good neighborliness, internal trade on that side of the planet. And on this side of the planet, it is warmongering, it is more attacks, it's more killing. So if we organize ourselves, we can now solicit solidarity also in the global south, in Southeast Asia, Central Asia, Latin America, But when we do not take that lead, oh, and by the way, we should also make a comment, and if Alex is still online, European Union also needs to work with the African Union because they've ceded their authority and moral voice to the United States.
They have, yes.
They have completely ceded. They are wealthy, they have the resources, they have the money, but they've ceded their space. And they look on. At least we can argue that we don't have much.
But you hit on a nail there, which is in fact. So even if the EU is towing the line of Trump, what about AU? As powerful as they are, as you said, they ceded it all to the US.
One thing I know, if you look throughout our country, Ghana, all of us as kids, one thing we are always told is that it doesn't matter what you do. Keep the good name, which means your principles and your values, never negotiate them. Even if in return you are not getting anything, you walk with pride. You walk with your heads up. Africa must do that. We must stop being gullible. You see, there is one thing our first president always said, we should never be beholden to somebody to live our lives. But it does not mean we can have our way. But once you and I, Dr. Rivers, everybody, even our partners outside, we know that we are on the right side of history. We believe in justice. And our independence coat of arms is freedom and justice. Once we can say convincingly that these are our values, let's continue to articulate them.
I mean, Dr. Riversing, let's end by circling back to the direct economic question. So the president, as I said earlier, had already directed, and the ministry has been meeting both energy and finance. You work in that same sector. And I know you've been in a lot of the committees trying to fix the problem with our energy sector. Model and come to the president says, come and tell me how we mitigate potential impact down the line, especially you telling us that the next pricing window, we will see the impact of the missiles in our pocket. What model could they possibly put up that could mitigate this long term if this persists?
Yeah, what I would say is that my good brother Tua Champon hits another very good point for me. It's a shame that we live in a continent that is always reactive and not proactive. You know, we had the COVID to learn from. We had the Russia-Ukraine war to also learn from. And here we are today talking about Israel, Iranian war. Would you think if Togo and Benin were fighting like this, there would be any impact on anybody, even in Africa?
Very much.
Not even at all, maybe. So why would the war happening somewhere have that kind of significant economic impact on us? When we took the break, I just went on social media and I just realized if it's true that there's an oil tanker on fire on the Strait of Hormuz. Yes, right now.
That is significant.
Yeah.
That is significant.
Yeah, if it's true, but because the videos are out now. So this is what I'm talking about, that if a 30% of the crude oil market trade takes off around this strait, then that's a very big thing, you know. So
So what should our mitigation measures be?
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
So I was even hoping by now engagement will start at the broader scope. This is not a bedroom chat. Let's open up the conversation around the industry, understand? Let's run the model together. MPA is there, the chamber is there, Seaboard, all of us. Let's be on the table to discuss this. You do get where I'm coming from. It's a shame that Angola was scared when crude oil prices were hitting 50. And you ask yourself, is that the same cry in the Middle East? No. Crude oil price can go as low as 15. They are comfortable selling and still producing. Because there's something called the cost of oil production per barrel. They can still produce oil at, say, $8 to $10. So if it's 15, they're still making 50% profit from the production. What is the cost of producing oil in Africa? Yeah, too huge. That's another topic for discussion. and I can give a short term. I think the short term that probably the government want to do to make sure that the ordinary Ghanaian does not suffer from this impact is probably to ignite the already existing 95 cedis ESLA that talks about the price stabilization.
Yeah.
And obviously the main goal of that levy was to
cushion us in times of shocks.
Exactly, which is highly, exposed, you know. So that could be one. But one of the things that also they could look at is also strengthening the gold, bond. To strengthen the cedi. And like I said, should we have the same pump price we have today with the current prices in the world, then the cedi should be doing around 7 to $1. Then we can maintain the same thing. So I'm sure that's what the finance minister and the energy minister will be doing. But going forward, we need to have a long-term plan that in 3 years, if this war happens, we will not have that shock. And the first one I would say is to get our local refineries active immediately. Because when fuel is locally produced, you can have a say in how much price because you are in a local content regime. You understand? Do you think Russia will be suffering from a global space? No, they have so much crude oil. Their refineries are working. They can even determine prices out of Platt. You can buy crude oil product in Russia, not on international benchmark. They don't even respect the international benchmark prices. They have it in abundance. And the second one I'll say is, today, like you said, in case there is even another turmoil in terms of the war, that with this whole tanks being bombed now, and there's no fuel for Ghana, the stocks at BOST, which is the strategic stock provider, cannot take the whole country for even a week. That is wrong. The strategic stock should have us for 2 months, according to the policy. And if you can take only one week, then we are in trouble. Then that's a national security issue. BOST should be strengthening and realigned in order to have strategic stock for the country. And we can work around the table with the experts and the industry to find a solution for all of us. Because if today, for example, BOST can hoard product against upcoming windows, they could pump in and also reduce the price down.
That's a very fascinating point. And I want to end with Dr. Tue Champo. And Doc, very, very briefly, just give me your projection. As far as what is happening is concerned, are you optimistic that Ghana can withstand the shock, such that we are not returning to what happened when Russia started this war on Ukraine? I mean, when you look into the crystal ball, I know you've done some models. What's your projection?
I think in the short term, so what I mean by short term is in the next 1 month to 2 month window, we have enough to be able to support the economy and to withstand any sort of short-term shocks that we're likely to see. And I think and all of the points have been made about local refining and the need to change or reprioritize what BOST does and whatnot. But the other point that I wanted to quickly add on to that is the issue of our sovereign wealth fund. So, when we sell the oil, we keep part of that money as well within the stabilization fund. And that is actually meant to cushion us in times that, for example, the oil price, drops, or you have other major macroeconomic, consequences in that. I have not checked the numbers as yet, but I would think that there should be something in there to be able to draw on that. And then the price stabilization recovery levy as well to sort of provide some sort of cushion. Fundamentally, I know that some of the modeling and the analysis is being done at the level of the MOF and the Ministry of Energy. But if you just abstract from that, two things likely happen. You either have a revenue response or you have an expenditure response, right? And in our case, even if the oil price went up and the gold prices stay as they are, the net impact on the revenue side probably may not be as big as one would expect. I'm not able to put any hard numbers to it at the moment. But on the expenditure side, and this is where I think maybe a lot of the concern really is, do we expect the Treasury to sort of make some further cuts
I mean, and that is a very important point there. And thank you all for joining me. I'm pretty sure we'll come back again and monitor. I think it's an intro for this to end as quickly as possible. Enjoy the rest of your evening.